Hello, welcome to our first edition of Rustle Up Something Rustic. I'm Judy Cripps, and the name of my business is Rustic Rugs. And here at Rustic Rugs, we love traditional rug hooking. We have a full line of patterns and all the supplies you need, but I'm going to talk about rug hooking later. What we're going to talk about right now is cooking, because that's the second thing I love to do besides eating. And what my goal is to give you some easy and simple recipes that are delicious and will impress your family and friends and still give you plenty of time to do rug hooking. So today we're going to do an apple recipe because in the fall I think of apples. My favorite apple to use in both cooking and eating is a Jonathan. Unfortunately, Jonathan is a very seasonal apple and sometimes kind of hard to find. But a great substitute is a Granny Smith, which are these green ones. So today we're making a raw apple cake. The recipe comes from my mother-in-law who passed away several years ago, who was a wonderful cook. So I'm using her old recipe, but I'm going to rename it because she named it raw apple cake, and I think that sounds like you're either going to be eating raw cake or you're not going to have to cook it, both of which are not true. So we're going to name it Lois's apple cake. So to start with, you need to peel and core and shred 5 apples. We need 4 cups of shredded apple. You can shred it I just shredded these with a box shredder, but if you have a food processor, you can do that. But you have to peel them first, and 5 of them will make about 4 cups. Now, after you shred them, they quickly turn brown. But for this cake, for the purposes of this cake, that doesn't make one bit of difference because they're going to be dumped in the batter anyway. So, to get started, on Lois's old recipe, it says 1 stick of oleo. Now, I don't know that you can even find anything that's called oleo in the store, and I'm sure my kids wouldn't even know what oleo is. I'm a butter lover, so I've substituted 1 stick of butter. You also need to have it softened or room temperature, which I never remember to do. So a good way to do that is you can take a stick of cold butter out of your refrigerator, stick it in the microwave it for 10 seconds, and that will soften it. So in my mixer here, I have 1 stick of softened butter and 2 cups of just sugar. And I've just mixed them up until they're fluffy. Now to this, I'm going to add my wet ingredients, which I've got 2 eggs here, and they don't have to be mixed up, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Now I'm going to mix those up. And I'm using a stand mixer, which you don't have to use. If you have a hand mixer, you can do it that way. I even tried mixing one by hand, which works. You just need a heavy-duty wooden spoon. Now to this mixture, I'm adding, let me look at my recipe here, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of soda and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and a half teaspoon of cloves. Gonna mix it again. Now it's time to add your flour. The flour, it's 2 cups of just all-purpose flour. Now a lot of cooks and recipes will say to sift your flour. I don't do that just because I'm all about quantity, not quality, and I want to get it done quickly. So, but a good thing to do before you measure your flour is whatever container you store your flour in, take a spoon and just kind of mix it up. And then take your measuring cup and use a spoon and fill the measuring cup, level it off, and that is so much better than just scooping it out. It just fluffs up the flour a little bit. So this is 2 cups of flour, and I'm just going to add about half of it to my mixture just so I don't have flour flying all over. We'll see if this works. And I'm going to turn it on low and mix the flour in. And then after that mixes, I'm just going to keep mixing in the rest of the flour. a real stiff batter. Sometimes cake batters are runny, but this is a real stiff batter, almost like a quick bread batter. After that gets mixed in, it's time to add our apples. This is 4 cups of shredded Granny Smith apples. So I'm going to add about half of them, I think. And there's a little juice down the bottom, and that's fine. Just add it in there. You just need to mix it just until it's kind of incorporated. And then we'll add the rest of the apples. The worst part of this recipe is getting the apples grated, but once you do that, it's easy. Mix up the apples again. Then, I like to bake cakes in a metal pan. You will not be able to find a metal pan like this anywhere because this we got 1,000,000 years ago when my husband and I got married. And all I did to the pan was spray it with cooking spray and then put some flour in it and kind of beat it around like that and spread out the flour. So what we're going to do is put the batter into the pan and just spread it out evenly. Try and get it all out. And this so you can kind of see what the batter looks like after it's done. Spread it out on the pan. Then this goes in the oven at 350 for about 45 to 50 minutes. Ovens vary a little bit. It needs to be when it's done, it'll pull away from the sides of the pan a little bit and use a toothpick and test the center. So that's all it is to make this cake. So this just goes in the oven. Now I'm not going to demonstrate the frosting, but when it's done, you take the pan out of the oven and put it on a cooling rack and let it cool. My favorite frosting is just a simple buttercream frosting, which is 1 stick of softened butter. Again, you can soften it in the microwave if you forget to put it out. And you add 2 cups of powdered sugar. And for this, you really need either a stand mixer or a hand mixer. And if you use a stand mixer, if you use one of these whisks for your frosting, that works great. But you mix up your butter and your powdered sugar until it's kind of fluffy. Teaspoon of vanilla. And then, depending on the temperature and a lot of things, you're either going to need to add 1 to 3 tablespoons of milk to your frosting. And then just beat it up until it's the consistency that you like. Spread it on your totally cooled cake. The cake needs to be cooled because if you spread it on a warm cake, it just kind of melts in, which I guess it wouldn't be a real bad thing. The other option is, according to Lois's recipe, is she suggests topping it with whipped cream, which I think would be delicious too. But we did it with the frosting. So that's it for our cooking experiment today. What we're going to do next is we're going to move into the retail area of Rustic Rugs and talk about rug hooking. So come along with us. Welcome back to Rustic Rugs. We're now in the retail area where we do traditional rug hooking here. And what that means is we are using wool and we cut it into strips and pull it through a special backing that is designed for rug hooking. Now, in this video, I am not teaching rug hooking. There are great videos you can get online. You can, this is a really nice book about rug hooking. So you can go to your library and probably find some rug hooking books. This is published by Stockpole Books, but it's also part of Rug Hooking Magazine, which is a wonderful source for rug hooking information. And also it's a nationwide ATHA, A-T-H-A, organization that supports local guilds and also publishes a wonderful rug hooking information and magazine. So that's another source of information for rug hooking. So today we're going to talk about a couple tips that I have for rug hooking. The first one is I wanted to show you a new rug. Since we're talking about apples, because fall is coming and our recipe was apples, this is a new design that I just came up with, very simple. When I was growing up, north of town was an apple orchard that we always drove to in the fall. And as I remember, along the side of the road, there was a white, kind of faded sign that said Farm Fresh Apples. So this was my, from my memory, my rug designed from that sign. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about is how to get this stripy, kind of old-looking board look as a background for your rugs. It's very simple. First, you need to think of it as wood, so you would hook everything straight. I normally go vertically, but I don't see why you couldn't do it horizontally, just so that you do all of it the same direction. So what you would do is you would hook the your features, the lettering and the apples and everything first, and then come back in with your background. You can choose any kind of lights that you like, and just do a mixture of stuff so that you have kind of some lights and darks within your background. This is just an example of some as-is wool that I have that would work great for a background. You can also do, I did a sunflower one time that I wanted it to look like an old, that kind of turquoisey color. So I used a bunch of turquoises and made the background the same way. The main point is just be sure and hook all in one direction, either vertically or horizontally, but they all need to be the same. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is when you're ordering wool, and I do my own overdyes, and I have people that call and want to order wool. So often they'll call and they'll tell me, I want a Christmas green, or I want a sunflower gold, or a barn red. Well, you know what? Those are all subjective terms in my mind, because I don't know what kind of a barn you're thinking about. Sunflowers can be from a bright yellow to a dull gold or a greenish gold. And so here's an example. People will call and say, I want an apple red. Well, what I did was I went to the store and I bought 5 apples. And then I brought them home and I tried to match up wool to the apple. And as you can see, how much variation there is in red within apples. So when you tell me that you want apple red, that's really not helpful. Unless you tell me I want a red delicious or a pink lady, that might be a little more helpful, but still. The best way when you're ordering wool is to, number one, I've had pretty good luck. Our cell phones now have such good cameras on them. I've had decent luck with, if you send a picture of the wool or of something that you want to match with your cell phone. But even that, it's not perfect because the lighting can be different and my lighting is different. The best and the best way to do color is to go to, and this is really cheap, you can go to any kind of fabric store, buy a skein of floss that is the color you want, and send that to whoever you're ordering your wool from. Second, you could do a paint chip, you could do a piece of fabric, send them a little piece of the wool that you're wanting to blend or mix or match, but give them something physical so that their eyes and your eyes are seeing the same thing. So those are my 2 tips for today. In Rustic Rugs, we have our own line of patterns, and we sell tons of wool. We have almost all the supplies you need for rug hooking. We also have hook-ins, usually the first and the third Saturdays of the month. We are open for retail sales by appointment only. You need to call or text. We also have a variety of classes throughout the year, and we can host retreats. So if you want to get your friends together and come out for a retreat, all of the food is homemade and delicious. So we would love to have you come and visit us at Rustic Rugs. I want to leave you with 3 thoughts. These are my 3 things that I love about rug hooking. Number 1, there's room for everyone. Number 2, there are no bad ideas. And number 3, you can always color outside the lines and do whatever you want to do. So thanks for taking time to watch this, and happy hooking!